Metroid Prime 4 just came out, and a lot of people have a lot of thoughts. Luckily for you, this is not a video about Metroid Prime 4, though that does also exist on the channel. Prime 4 got me thinking about the Metroid franchise. There's always debate about what makes a good Metroid game, the merits and faults of 2D and 3D Metroid, which versions of games are worth playing, and in general what the series should and shouldn't do. Prime 4 also got me thinking about the Metroid universe as a whole, as did my recent playthrough of Prime Remastered. The feeling of loneliness in Prime 1 is true whiplash after Prime 4, and I choose Prime 1 over 4 any day. But it did somewhat recontextualize the feeling of Prime for me. It really isn't just feeling alone on Talon 4, it is a lonely experience, even compared to most other Metroid games. To varying degrees, every other Prime game has more character presence, and even plenty of the 2D games venture into this territory. The loneliest Metroid games are generally the ones praised the most, but at the same time, it limits how much you can expand the universe or push Samus as a character. It's how you wind up getting the same type of ancient alien race to save over and over, or exclusively hanging out with computers and corpses. That's where side games come in. Making a Metroid game is a delicate balancing act to really appeal to the fans and sell the games whatsoever. I would propose that a 2D numbered entry and a Prime numbered entry aren't able to cover everything the Metroid franchise can as a whole. We were wrong about Federation Force. Sure, you can argue about the timing of its release or its gameplay, if you actually played it. But fundamentally, the idea of getting to explore different corners of this galaxy away from the big adventures of Samus is genius and necessary. Plenty of other IPs dip their toes into different genres and mechanics, some on a pretty regular basis. So why not Metroid? That's right, Metroid Football League. No? Okay. In this video, I'll be putting forward my own ideas for ways Metroid could expand the series and lore through new, unique side games, while ensuring the numbered entries of MercurySteam and Retro stay laser-focused and high quality. Some of these are based off ideas the creators themselves have had, while others are my own design. Our first stop is with a single-player focused game that brings the franchise into a whole new genre, a genre that Retro themselves considered long ago. Metroid Tactics is basically Metroid XCOM. And I love Metroid and I love XCOM. So, much like XCOM, you'll technically be playing as some high-ranking military, probably with the Galactic Federation, with Samus as the principal member of your team. However, I don't want it to be Samus and infinite faceless Gal-fed troops. More in the vein of Mario & Rabbids or codename Steam, this turn-based adventure will focus on a fairly small core cast, composed of Samus, Gal-fed troops, and other bounty hunters. The trick of this game would be finding the ways it could distinguish itself from the rebooted XCOM games, which are excellent in their own right. Those games place heavy emphasis on both turn-based combat missions and strategic resource use, and have you racing against a ticking doomsday clock. Metroid Tactics would place less emphasis on research and resources, but would aim to inject the XCOM formula with Metroidvania-style exploration. The original pitch for Metroid Tactics had this be Samus's first major outing into the universe, joining the Galactic Federation in their first encounters with the space pirates. Much like when coming up with ideas for Prime 4 years before its release, I find nothing about this time period interesting for a new entry. I'd much prefer Metroid 1 and Zero Mission remain the impetus of the series. Therefore, I think either between Super and Fusion, or Fusion and Dread are good points for this story. Prime 4 and Other M are both technically between Super and Fusion, but I think everyone, including Nintendo, wants to forget Other M, and we don't know how the whole Prime 4 dimension hopping timeline works yet. I'd rather put this game in that spot to get a more classic Samus to play with, and still have the option for Space Pirates and Metroids. But if they wanted to put this before Dread to show the progress from Fusion to her starting point in Dread, that works too. Similar to Hunters, the plot could revolve around various factions racing to find something powerful hidden on a large abandoned planet. The Federation is trying to get down there and secure it, while other factions like the Pirates and other bounty hunters want it for their own nefarious purposes. To locate this mysterious object, they seek out the help of various hunters, with Samus of course leading the charge and guiding Gal-fed troops in the field. Diving into the gameplay, the biggest distinction would be between the Federation troops and the bounty hunters. Federation soldiers would act more like a core group of XCOM soldiers, something like 5 or 6 defined characters with 1 or 2 in the wings that join up if someone on your squad is down for the count, or some other plot reason. They'd have much more standard actions like running, basic rifle fire, spraying fire in a wide cone, covering fire, overwatch, grenades, You get the gist. All of these would cost action points from a unified pool, replenishing a certain amount per turn. Your base team size would be 5, for the most part, varying by mission. However, for main missions, one of those slots would be Samus, introducing us to Bounty Hunter gameplay. Bounty Hunters have a much wider array of abilities, more action points and less cost, and would really act as super soldiers with various applications on missions. Bounty Hunters would be able to move more, access unique areas, and attack in ways that can shape the battle, such as altering cover, moving enemies, and affecting stats. For example, Samus's basic shot and charge shot are pretty cheap to use. Missiles pack a big punch in a small radius. Her morph ball form gives her additional speed and the ability to lay bombs as one-turn traps. Other beams could let you shoot through walls like the wave beam or freeze enemies. Her scan visor has her share enemy weak point info to allow for critical hits, and her grapple beam could move objects and enemies or reposition Samus. Compared to other hunters, she's a jack of all trades that can be shaped into several playstyles. Here's how gameplay would play out. Missions would have you freely control characters to explore areas, more similar to something like Baldur's Gate 3. You could keep them grouped up or have them split off, especially when using hunters like Samus to access difficult areas. Searching these areas would feel pretty much like a normal Metroid, looking for secret items, keys, and hidden paths. Once enemies are found and engaged, turn-based combat would automatically start. Throughout the game, you'll have fights with local wildlife and squads of enemy soldiers, showdowns with bounty hunters, and boss fights with giant creatures. A big emphasis of the original pitch was bringing Metroid's large-scale bosses to this genre, and that should absolutely still be a focus, needing to navigate your whole team to target weak points and keep them alive. Some enemies could drop loot or items, while bosses would carry major upgrades or keys to finding the main objective. After missions, you'd head back to the Galfed cruiser and prep for the next mission. To simplify this aspect compared to other tactical games, I think you'd get a limited set of main actions to perform before choosing the next mission, essentially using the action point system in this phase as well. Smaller upgrades would be pretty cheap, while larger projects would take up most of the phase. All of this would use funding provided by the Federation per mission, as well as additional funds from anything recovered along the way. During the prep phase, you'd use your money on the following: expanding and refining the planetary search, buying upgrades and items for your squad, enhancing individual members with the Fed troops each spec'd into a specific class and unlocking unique abilities, leveling up Samus, or purchasing bounty hunter contracts, and maybe other things I haven't considered. Enhancing your soldiers will get you loadouts like sniper, explosives, and mech pilot. Leveling Samus up is a little tricky to justify. I don't necessarily want her finding upgrades in the wild like usual. I'd rather things like missiles, bombs, and movement all be things she theoretically has from the get-go. So my silly solution is that you just need to pay more for those unlocks because she's a contractor. It's basically hazard pay. There will still be some weapons and abilities to find through searching areas though. As for the other bounty hunters, you would be able to add them onto your roster for a set period of time. Sometimes you can only afford them for one mission, other times you can purchase a longer contract if you know you'll want to keep them around. You'll never need to use other bounty hunters if you don't want to. Truthfully, these guys are mostly in the game because they'll be cool and fun to use, with the most unique abilities in the game and letting different players play how they want. Once the prep phase ends, you'll be presented a few possible missions to go on that will progress your search. Over time, you'll be able to revisit past sections of the world as well, with secondary missions unlocked as certain weapons or abilities are available. For example, maybe you notice an ice beam door on a mission. If you get the ice beam or have an ice-based hunter with you, that secondary mission will become available for you to reap the reward. I also think there would be side challenges on other planets in the solar system, only sending 1 to 3 units out on highly specialized tailor-made challenges, sometimes requiring specific units. These would give even more specialized unlocks, maybe some things purely for fun like cosmetics, and would mostly be for those looking for full completion and tough challenges. I think while those troops are sent out, they'll be unavailable for a mission or two, but maybe that's too much. Keeping in mind that other factions are after the objective too, I think how this would play out is along the lines of the Blights in Breath of the Wild. If you don't hunt down those factions, you'll have tough fights added onto the finale. If you take them out earlier though, they'll be down and out. Again, this is mostly a choice of playstyle, whether you want to speedrun and test yourself or experience everything thoroughly. I've already talked about this game more than enough, so a couple more things before we move on. While this game should introduce cool new hunters for us to obsess over for years, I'd love to see more hunters from Prime Hunters return, since we'll be busy with Silex in the main Prime series. I think Noxus would be a perfect hireable hunter for you to use, after gaining his trust over the years that Samus has the best interests of the galaxy in mind. He would be your free ticket to ice powers, freezing enemies, creating difficult terrain, and using ricochet ricochet shots, as well as his morph ball form striking in a circle around him to push enemies away. I also think Weevil should absolutely be leading one of the factions, as a boss fight involving his split morph ball form in a turn-based game sounds awesome, tracking down his fast-moving top half while the turret remains a constant threat. If you really wanted to have everyone return, I think Trace and Candon could both be enemies, Trace's fight a tense battle locating the invisible hunter while he snipes at you, Candon affecting units of vision and abilities, and Spire could be another ally hunter, wielding fire and using his morph form to climb surfaces with ease. And I think having a multiplayer mode would be really cool, pitting the Federation and pirates against each other and allowing one player control over those enemy hunters and various types of pirate troops. Metroid Tactics was a great idea years ago when it was first conceived, and it's just as good an idea today. I'd absolutely love to see something like this. I put 2 titles up front for this one because it's more for broad interest than specific concepts like Metroid Tactics. I just think we should get a 2D spin-off game. While different genres or sticking to 3D FPS games is great and all, 2D is half of this whole Metroid equation, and no one has done it better than MercurySteam. I'd love to see them able to get a little bit weird and show us something we haven't seen before. That said, 2D does inherently limit the possibilities of a spin-off a bit. More likely than not, it would be some totally isolated single-player story, which would be kind of pointless for me to ramble about here. These are my 2 vague concepts though. The first, Chozo Trials, sticks to that single player concept and reintroduces us to a long forgotten form of Samus gameplay. This would be a game entirely centered on Zero Suit Samus. In my mind, it's something like a final training by the Chozo before she goes out into the galaxy. I know the Metroid manga exists and canon is a tricky topic in Metroid, just run with it. This would still be a 2D Metroidvania at heart, having Samus alone in a dangerous environment with abilities and tools we normally don't get to see. A stealth and agility focused Metroid game could be really neat. And that's all the ideas I've had for that one. Next, Metroid Shadows is instead a 2D multiplayer Metroidvania. At some nebulous point in the timeline, upon entering an odd temple, Samus' spirit is split 4 ways around the world. Who's the real Samus? Well, whoever wins. 4 players, all as Samus, would be placed into a shared labyrinthine map, exploring and understanding the layout to find their way out. Along the way, you can choose to find power-ups, hunt down other Samuses, or find the final boss as quickly as possible. This is vaguely inspired by a game called Crawl, though I haven't played it in a while, so I do mean vaguely. I'm not sure if this would work best with set map layouts and rotating key locations, or full-on roguelike maps, making each session a new experience. If you fall to another Samus during the game, you will be excluded from winning, but you'll still be able to spawn in as a ghost enemy to take other Samuses down. If multiple players reach the final boss, there will be one last showdown after the boss is defeated with whoever is left alive. And that's the game. A little Metroid, a little Crawl, a little Smash Run. A fun, small, self-contained side game using the classic 2D format. Like I said, it'd be great to see what MercurySteam would do with the IP if left to their own devices. Though, realistically, they're either working on Metroid 6 or like a remake of Super or something. And that's great. I'll love those too. This concept comes from 2 places. Another scrapped Metroid spin-off idea, and a joke in my group chat. Here's the idea. A while back, Nintendo was looking at making a competitive multiplayer-focused shooter, essentially expanding upon what was done in Prime Hunters and Prime 2. Some work was done on it, but ultimately it never came to be, except for the general concept of multiplayer shooter being used in the co-op Federation Force. I've already wanted such a mode since my Prime 4 concept video, and since we didn't get that in Prime 4, I'm bringing it back. Besides, Nintendo wants to push their new online infrastructure, right? What better way than a timeless genre easy to suck in new players? And the joke half of the idea? I'm ripping off Star Wars Battlefront. Metroid Prime especially has enjoyed showing us big conflicts between the Federation and space pirates and Dark Samus, with Prime 4 having large-scale assaults in major narrative moments. If a lack of isolation was a pain point in Prime 4, splitting the emphasis on the supporting cast into its own game would allow Prime 5 to get back to its solitary roots. Not that this game would be canon at all though, or specifically centered around the world of Prime. Instead, this is almost like the Hyrule Warriors of Metroid, combining aspects of all Metroid into a frantic high-energy shooter, using characters and factions from throughout Metroid history. Imagine this as an all-purpose multiplayer shooter. We take the high player count battles, specialized units, and heroes of Battlefront, and the tailored movesets of a hero shooter. Let's focus on the main event, the large-scale battles. While we'd probably need a few more factions, here are 4 I'll use to illustrate the idea. The Galactic Federation, the Space Pirates, the Chozo Malkin Tribe, and the X. The Federation is made up of troopers with basic loadouts like assault, sniper, heavy weapons, and a medic/engineer. They're middling in health and movement, but can generally face off against any threat. The space pirates are stronger and faster, but easier to hit, and have bigger openings in their attacks, with a default gunner class and others being melee focused or flying with jetpacks, pulling from the pirate types used throughout the series. The Chozo are extremely mobile, but have slow, precise attacks and long respawn times. You'd see attacks and types of soldiers seen in Metroid Dread. Lots of spears and clinging to walls. And X is the weirdest army. All players would start as an X parasite and would have to latch onto a host. If they spend enough time on them, the host will die and the player will then control a perfect replica, allowing the X team to be an amalgam of whoever they're fighting. To make this a little easier, I think basically every map would have some form of wildlife that the X could latch onto instead. Imagine clip farming as a regular old beetle. Where do the big names come in? In my mind, it would be through a system that's a mix of the heroes and bonuses in Battlefront 2 and kill streaks in Call of Duty. Before the game, you would pick a set of streak bonuses with a limited budget. Some of these would be dropping simple power-ups, some would give you temporary powerful weapons, others would bring in various super units for you to control. These could be bounty hunters like the Federation getting Rundisgor and Gandreda. Others would be more specific. The Federation could get mech units, the space pirates could call in bosses like Kraid or the Omega Pirate, the Malkin can get bosses from Dread and Emmy, and the X maybe get bosses from Fusion and other Metroids. However, like Battlefront, whoever hits a certain point threshold first will get to play as the team's leader. The Federation has Samus, featuring basically a full endgame Prime kit. The space pirates have Ridley, a massive monstrosity with flight and fire. The Chozo get Ravenbeak, swift and highly lethal, and the X get the SAX, like Samus but with unique elements. I imagine others could be a Phazon army with Dark Samus and a Robot and Metroid army with Silex. Throw Mother Brain in there too, somewhere, I don't know. Maps could also be designed with heroes in mind, with grapple points, small tunnels, and destruction so that heroes are the most versatile on the battlefield. With these armies, you'd face off in modes like Deathmatch, Conquest, and Capture the Flag, as well as more specialized modes like Bounty, pitting teams against each other to be the first to claim an artifact or take down a giant stage boss. And maps would, of course, be based on locations from throughout the 2D and 3D games. Going back to Prime 2 and Hunters though, small-scale firefights should absolutely still be in play here. If you're not in the mood for giant skirmishes, you can head over to a smaller, classic arena-style mode. In these, you would control the assortment of bounty hunters, each maintaining their unique weapons and abilities, in a wide variety of modes. Of course, core modes like Deathmatch, Capture the Flag, King of the Hill, and team variants would be present, along with modes taken from other Metroid multiplayer, like Bounty, Prime Hunter, and Survival. We could also get a little more unique with it, adding something like a free-for-all horde survival mode, a race to get an objective, or an asymmetrical battle where one player controls a boss. And with rule modification like Halo and COD, custom games can expand options even more. As for the roster, you'd be playing as your core cast, unfortunately opting out of the larger leaders like Ridley. There's Samus, the Prime Hunters, the Prime 3 Hunters, Dark Samus, Ravenbeak, SAX, and characters original to this game. Again, gotta get those new faces so one of them can star in Metroid Prime 7. Each would have their own movement options, beams, transformations, and special attacks. I could probably go more in depth about movesets and maps and game modes, but I mean, this is an easy pitch. Bring back Metroid multiplayer in an age dominated by the genre, with a console that can more than handle it. And lastly, we're sticking to multiplayer, but this time treading back into the treacherous waters of cooperative shooters. Again, I really think Federation Force was just the wrong place, wrong time. You don't have to look far to see a plethora of cooperative online experiences that hit it big, from serious in tone to silly and chaotic. There's a massive market for Nintendo to tap here, and Metroid is a great candidate to put their own spin on it, especially considering they've already experimented with it before. Metroid Bounty Hunters would be a 2 to 4 player co-op shooter in the style of the Prime games, maybe developed by Retro, that would have you and a squad of friends take on various missions and challenges. If you take the core interactions of Metroid, searching for objects, progressing through areas, and taking down enemies, there's massive potential for variety in those objectives. Things like recovering artifacts back to a ship, getting through a dangerous reactor to shut it down, taking down space pirates, tracking a dangerous hunter on the move, defending Galactic Federation troops against waves of enemies, fighting a giant enemy crab. All of this would work excellently, and could be split between a somewhat structured campaign hopping around planets for missions, a separate set of hardcore challenges, and something like roguelike dailies that mix and match elements into distinct missions on a regular basis. In my mind, this game would be kind of a mix between things like Call of Duty, Spec Ops and Zombies modes, or Helldivers, and more lighthearted games like Repo and Lethal Company, depending on how you and your friends want to play. With difficulty modes and focus on atmosphere and design, you could create an experience that tests score-chasing squads while allowing casual groups of friends to just have a good time. As for rewards, besides going for a high score, I don't know. Could be some form of unlockable challenges or difficulties, or maybe some cosmetics. Speaking of cosmetics, a major difference between this game and Fed Force would be the player characters. More specifically, or less specifically, whoever you want them to be. With an art style that blends Dread, Federation Force, and the Project Valkyrie concept art, you'll be playing as stylized versions of your own custom bounty hunters. I assume this would work best with pre-made armor pieces and helmets, where you could then change the scale, shape, and color of certain parts. Morph Ball would work similarly, picking from default movement types and customizing from there. I think you could also set a preferred loadout for your hunter, as well as a favorite beam and other attack options, though missions would provide you with loadouts ideal for each task. This element would feel a little bit more like Deep Rock Galactic, ensuring members of the team each have a task they're best at. The best part about this? It could be canon. I figure if this game is set before Metroid 2, you could have droves of hunters going off to fight pirates and die to Metroids, lending even more reason for Samus to go out and exterminate them all. Lastly, since the framework is already all there, I think competitive multiplayer would be a no-brainer too. This could take the form of 3 or 4 person free-for-alls with your squad, going against each other for fun, but I'm mostly thinking about this in a squad versus squad setting. We could easily import over the arena multiplayer ideas from my last concept, but I'd also like to see teams working together to beat another team. 2 teams gunning through a Metroidvania style map to complete a mission first, hindering each other along the way, or 1 team escorting Gal-fed troops while another works with space pirates. I also think custom missions would be a must, giving players an infinite pool of content to play and create. Regardless of the specifics, this kind of game would be an absolute blast to play, and would expand the Metroid brand to a whole new audience. Those 4 ideas are what came to mind for me when thinking about potential Metroid offshoots. I already sort of mentioned this, but I think a lot of their individual concepts could work in any of the pitches. 2 teams squaring off against the same large alien target, 2 armies fighting each other, racing to complete a competitive Metroidvania first. Those are all interesting corners of the Metroid brand that can work in a ton of settings. And beyond that, at the core of the idea, when I talk about Metroid needing side games, it's because there's still so much to explore, like new bounty hunters, revitalized multiplayer, and putting Metroid objectives into different formats and genres. By approaching these elements separately and expanding them into full games, you not only introduce entirely new experiences to fans, but also allow the primary entries to be much more focused on the foundations of a Samus-centered Metroid game, delivering on the proper atmosphere and telling a more developed story. So, which games would you want to play? What other ideas do you have for the Metroid franchise? Let me know in the comments. If you haven't watched my review of Prime 4, go check that out. A lot of my issues with that game led me to the conclusion that Metroid should do more side games. Otherwise, my last major videos for the year will be Smash related. So subscribe if you want to stick around for that, and as always, thanks for watching.